Tom jolted awake to the deafening silence. Something was terribly wrong. The rhythmic hum of his farm's irrigation system, which had always been the comforting soundtrack of dawn, was absent. Blinking against the dim light of early morning, he hurried to his window. Instead of the familiar expanse of neatly paved driveway leading to his farmhouse, he saw a labyrinth of high, twisting hedges. Every inch of what used to be his driveway was transformed into an intricate maze, designed with such precision that even the most experienced navigator would find themselves lost. It wasn't just a random act of vandalism or an accidental landscaping disaster. This was a calculated move, a statement that screamed defiance. Tom's heart pounded as he realized that Karen, the notorious enforcer of community rules known as HOA Karen, had taken it upon herself to repurpose his driveway into a shortcut for her own convenience. For months, she had insisted that his property violated the neighborhood's strict standards, using every loophole in the HOA rulebook to bully him into submission. Now, in a final, outrageous twist, she had altered his driveway without permission, trimming the borders and rerouting the path so that it slashed directly through his property, a shortcut that saved her minutes each day. But Tom wasn't one to sit idly by. The sight of his cherished driveway, turned into a chaotic, unapproved pathway, sparked a fire within him. He recalled every fine and every passive-aggressive note left on his door, each one a reminder of Karen's overzealous crusade against anything that didn't fit her ideal of perfection. This wasn't just about a shortcut. It was about the sanctity of his property, his autonomy, and the dignity of a hard-working farmer who'd built his life from the ground up. Determination set in. Tom knew that if Karen thought she could reshape his land to suit her petty desires, she was in for a lesson she would not soon forget. In that moment, with the morning light revealing his driveway's unwelcome transformation, Tom resolved to reclaim his property in the most creative and perhaps deliciously ironic way possible, by turning the very shortcut Karen had imposed on him into a sprawling hedge maze, a living, breathing testament to his independence. And so, with resolute determination, he began plotting a counterstrike that would leave HOA Karen both lost and astonished. Cedar Grove Farms was the pride of rural Meadowview, a sprawling estate where the rugged beauty of nature blended seamlessly with the fruits of modern hard work. I had inherited this land from my father, who taught me that a farm was more than just a place to work. It was a legacy, a testament to perseverance, and a sanctuary of freedom. Every morning, I traversed the winding gravel driveway that led from the main road to my farmhouse, passing by fields of golden wheat and orchards bursting with ripe fruit. It was a simple, unpretentious life, one that I cherished with every fiber of my being. Yet, not all in Meadowview shared this ethos. Just beyond my property line lay the meticulously managed subdivision of Cedar Grove Estates, a neighborhood where every detail was dictated by a relentless homeowners association. In this polished community, uniformity was law. Every house was a mirror of the next. Every lawn was trimmed to precise perfection, and any deviation from the strict aesthetic was not merely frowned upon. It was punished. At the center of this regime was Karen Miller, infamously known as HOA Karen. In her late 40s, Karen was the self-appointed enforcer of Cedar Grove's rigid standards. With a clipboard always at the ready and a smartphone in hand, she patrolled the streets like a hawk, scrutinizing every curb, every hedge, every inch of property with an almost obsessive attention to detail. To Karen, conformity wasn't just desirable. It was the only acceptable way to live. Anything that deviated from her narrow vision of perfection was an offense that demanded immediate rectification, often through fines, warnings, and relentless harassment. I, however, had always been a man of independent spirit. My farm was my refuge, a place where creativity and tradition intertwined, where I could innovate and experiment without the suffocating constraints of bureaucratic edicts. Over the years, I had built a modest but thriving enterprise at Cedar Grove Farms, selling fresh produce and homemade goods at my farm stand. It was a beacon of local pride, a symbol of self-reliance, and a testament to the idea that beauty and success could flourish outside the confines of conformity. For months, Karen had taken issue with my farm stand, complaining that its colorful displays and rustic charm clashed with the uniformity of Cedar Grove estates. I'd received a series of fines and notice after notice, each one more arbitrary than the last. Yet, I had endured it all with a quiet dignity, believing that eventually the community would come to see the value in individuality. But then, without warning, she struck a devastating blow. She reconfigured my driveway into a shortcut that cut right through my property, ostensibly to improve traffic flow for the neighborhood. That unauthorized alteration was not only a blatant invasion of my property rights, but it also undermined everything I had built. My driveway was the lifeline of my farm, the route that carried visitors, customers, and supplies. To see it hijacked and repurposed by Karen's petty interference was a personal affront that I could no longer tolerate. I realized then that action was imperative. My mind raced through possibilities, and one wild idea took root. A plan that would not only restore my driveway, but also serve as a pointed rebuttal to Karen's intrusive tactics. I would transform the very shortcut she had imposed into a living, intricate hedge maze, a maze that would reclaim my property and turn her bold intrusion into a work of art. And in doing so, I'd remind everyone in Cedar Grove that true beauty lay in diversity, creativity, and the unyielding right to live as one sees fit. The next morning, I drove out to inspect the damage. The once familiar, smooth gravel path that I had laid out with care was now a jagged, disjointed route. Karen had not only carved a shortcut, but she'd also trimmed and reshaped sections of the surrounding landscape without any consultation. The result was an unsightly patchwork of uneven terrain, a stark violation of my property, and a personal affront to everything I stood for. I immediately documented everything. I took countless photos and videos of the altered driveway, noting the precise points where the new path encroached upon my land. I reviewed my security footage and, as expected, saw Karen meticulously overseeing the transformation, her eyes glinting with self-satisfied determination as she directed her crew of local enforcers. It was clear that this was no random act. It was a calculated maneuver designed to assert her control over the neighborhood. Furious, but not defeated, I resolved that I would not let Karen's audacity stand unchallenged. I began to research creative ways to reclaim my property, exploring ideas that could serve as both a functional solution and a symbolic statement of my independence. That's when the idea struck me: a hedge maze. Not just any maze, but one that would cover the very area of the stolen driveway, crafted meticulously to confound and humiliate the very person who had dared to alter it without permission. I reached out to my trusted landscaper and a team of horticultural experts, explaining my vision. Together, we drafted a plan to convert the entire length of the unauthorized shortcut into an elaborate maze of carefully trimmed hedges. The design would be intricate: labyrinthine paths, unexpected dead ends, and cleverly hidden turns that would not only restore my driveway's functionality, but also serve as a living artwork, a tribute to the beauty of unbridled creativity. Over the next few days, while Karen remained oblivious to the storm brewing on my property, I began the transformation. Workers arrived early in the morning, and armed with top-of-the-line hedge trimmers, they set to work clearing the altered path. I supervised every detail, ensuring that the design was executed to perfection. The plan was audacious. By the time the project was complete, anyone trying to navigate my driveway would be forced to negotiate a maze that only I could command, a maze that was my final answer to Karen's intrusion. I documented the entire process, recording time-lapse footage of the hedge maze taking shape. Every snip of the trimmers, every strategic turn of the hedge was a small act of rebellion, a reclaiming of my property and my autonomy. I updated my online community with live posts and photos, and soon, my digital followers began to rally behind me. Comments and hashtags like hashtag Maze of Freedom and hashtag Karen Maze started trending locally, and supportive messages poured in from neighbors who were tired of the HOA's petty overreach. As the Hedge maze grew, so did the tension. I received reports from some residents that Karen herself had been seen pacing near her property, apparently frustrated by the disappearance of the clear, unobstructed driveway. The very thought of her having to navigate the maze I had built, where every wrong turn would be a stark reminder of her intrusion, filled me with a sense of vindication. This wasn't just about landscaping. It was a battle for property rights, for creative freedom, and for the very dignity of a hardworking farmer who refused to be bullied by an overzealous enforcer. Every day, I polished the details of the design, ensuring that the maze was as challenging as it was beautiful. The hedges were trimmed to a uniform height, but the paths were designed with unexpected twists and turns. Strategic openings allowed access to the main road, but only after a series of bewildering choices. The final touch was a small, discreet plaque at the entrance that read, "Property of Tom. No shortcuts allowed." A silent, defiant message to Karen and anyone who might consider tampering with my land. By the time the Hedge maze was complete, my driveway had been transformed from a flat, unremarkable stretch of gravel into a living labyrinth, a testament to ingenuity, a monument to resistance. I knew that when Karen returned, she would have to confront the reality of my reclaiming my property in the most creative way imaginable. And I was ready for that moment. News of the Hedge maze spread like wildfire throughout Cedar Grove. Social media exploded with posts and images of my transformed driveway, with neighbors and local bloggers praising the bold, innovative solution. Hashtags like hashtag #KarenMaze, hashtag no shortcuts, and hashtag property reclaim began trending, and soon, my story was the talk of the community. Local news channels picked up the story and sent reporters to interview residents, capturing the bewildered expressions of those who had once accepted Karen's overreach without question. "It's a marvel of modern rebellion," one reporter said on live television, standing in front of the intricate maze. "A man stands up for his rights in the most creative way possible." The narrative shifted from a petty dispute over property boundaries to a broader discussion on individual freedom and the right to innovate. Within the HOA board, divisions deepened. Emergency meetings were called as board members struggled to defend Karen's decision to alter my driveway without permission. Some members, now swayed by the overwhelming digital evidence and the public's growing support for my stance, began to question whether strict enforcement of such arbitrary rules was truly in the best interest of the community. Leaked meeting minutes revealed heated debates, with one board member stating, "We cannot allow one person's personal vendetta to dictate the landscape of Cedar Grove." The internal discord threatened to undermine the very authority of the HOA. Karen, meanwhile, was in full panic mode. Rumors circulated that she was preparing to file another complaint, this time aimed at forcing me to remove the Hedge maze and restore the approved driveway. In a series of frantic social media posts and angry phone calls, she insisted that my actions were a violation of community standards and that I would soon face severe penalties. But every attempt to suppress the truth was met with a torrent of digital evidence. The time-lapse videos, the high-resolution images of the maze, and countless supportive comments from residents who celebrated the reclamation of property rights. I continue to document every twist and turn of the Hedge maze on my community forum. Live streams from the field showed neighbors testing the maze and marveling at its complexity. Supporters gathered in droves, and every shared post and hashtag reinforced the sentiment that property rights were not negotiable. If Karen thinks she can force her way onto someone else's property, she's in for a surprise. One post read, and the comment sections exploded with similar declarations of defiance. The community's digital uprising forced the HOA board to take notice. Facing mounting pressure, they announced a final public hearing to address the issue, a showdown that would decide the fate of property rights and community governance in Cedar Grove. In the days leading up to the hearing, online petitions amassed thousands of signatures, and local influencers and bloggers wrote op-eds decrying the erosion of individual freedom under arbitrary HOA rule. As the hearing approached, the tension reached a fever pitch. I spent the nights reviewing every piece of digital evidence and strategizing with a group of like-minded neighbors who had long been frustrated by the HOA's rigid policies. We knew that this wasn't just about a driveway. It was about asserting our right to live freely and creatively. The Hedge maze had become a symbol of that very resistance, a living artwork that stood in defiance of oppressive conformity. On the morning of the final public hearing, Cedar Grove's community center was packed. Residents arrived with signs, wearing shirts emblazoned with slogans like "No More Shortcuts" and "Property Reclaimed." The atmosphere was electric, charged with a sense of unity and purpose. The digital evidence was displayed on large screens for all to see, a gallery of images and videos documenting every moment of the Hedge maze's creation and every instance of Karen's interference. Every comment, every shared hashtag, every whispered conversation outside the community center reinforced one undeniable truth. The days of arbitrary HOA enforcement were coming to an end. The stage was set for a dramatic confrontation, a moment when the collective will of Cedar Grove would force the board to either support individual rights or face a resounding backlash from its residents. As the final hours before the hearing ticked by, the tension in the community was palpable. The story of the Hedge maze had transcended a mere act of vandalism. It had become a clarion call for the protection of personal property and creative expression. And as I prepared to step into that boardroom, I knew that the outcome of this confrontation would forever alter the power dynamics in Cedar Grove. The decisive moment came on a cool, clear morning at the Cedar Grove Community Center. The boardroom was packed. HOA officials, local law enforcement representatives, community leaders, and hundreds of determined residents filled every seat. The air buzzed with anticipation and the collective hope of a community ready for change. With a calm yet unyielding presence, Councilwoman Sarah Jenkins stepped up to the podium, her eyes reflecting the shared resolve of everyone in the room. After a thorough review of all digital evidence, including time-stamped footage of the unauthorized driveway alteration, detailed logs of the fines issued, and the impassioned testimonials from our residents, we have reached an incontrovertible conclusion. Councilwoman Jenkins began, her voice steady and authoritative. It is abundantly clear that the actions taken by Mrs. Karen Miller, who unilaterally transformed a private driveway into a shortcut, were not rooted in any legitimate concern for community safety or aesthetics. Instead, these actions were driven by personal bias and a flagrant abuse of power that has undermined the very rights of property owners in Cedar Grove. A heavy silence fell over the room as Jenkins continued. Effective immediately, the HOA board will rescind all fines and sanctions imposed in relation to this incident. Furthermore, we will launch a full disciplinary review of the policies and practices that allowed such an overreach to occur. We will also implement new guidelines that ensure every resident's right to manage their property is fully protected. Today's decision is not merely about reversing an arbitrary fine. It is a resounding declaration that Cedar Grove stands for fairness, accountability, and the preservation of individual freedoms. Her words resonated powerfully throughout the room, and murmurs of approval swept through the assembly. At that moment, a longtime community advocate, known for his unwavering defense of property rights, rose to speak. "Today, we stand united," he declared, his voice ringing with passion. "No resident should be forced to endure the tyranny of arbitrary rule enforcement. Let this vote be the turning point, a clear signal that our community values innovation, independence, and the sanctity of private property above all else. We demand accountability, and we will not rest until every violation of our rights is addressed with swift, decisive action." His declaration was met with thunderous applause, uniting everyone in a powerful call for change. Following his address, a senior official from the local regulatory agency presented the final dossier, a meticulously compiled record of all digital evidence, expert evaluations, and official reports that confirmed my property modifications were entirely within legal rights. The evidence was irrefutable. The Hedge maze was a lawful, creative reclamation of my property in response to unauthorized alterations by HOA Karen. The Internal Affairs Panel unanimously endorsed strict disciplinary measures against those who facilitated the infringement, and the full report was scheduled for immediate public release. Councilwoman Jenkins concluded, "Let this resolution mark the dawn of a new era for Cedar Grove, a community where every resident's rights are honored and where public authority is exercised with integrity." Our vote today is a resounding declaration that we will protect our freedoms and that no one, regardless of their self-appointed power, can impose their will on our community without accountability. Together, we stand for justice, transparency, and the inalienable right to live and work without arbitrary interference. Her final words, delivered with unwavering conviction, sealed the turning point in our battle for property rights and creative freedom. In that defining moment, as every face in the boardroom shone with determination and hope, the balance of power shifted irrevocably. The overwhelming digital evidence and the unified voice of the community forced the HOA board to take decisive action, a turning point that would forever reshape the governance of Cedar Grove. The days of arbitrary, personal vendettas were over, and a future built on respect for individual rights was finally within our grasp. In the weeks that followed the historic vote, Cedar Grove underwent a profound transformation. News of the rescinded fines and sweeping reforms enacted by the HOA board spread rapidly throughout local media and online communities, sparking fervent debates about property rights, creative freedom, and the role of individual expression in our neighborhood. Editorials in the local newspaper, with headlines such as "A New Dawn for Cedar Grove" and "Community United for Freedom," celebrated the decisive actions taken to protect every homeowner's right to manage their property without fear of arbitrary interference. Hashtags like #PropertyRights, #NoMoreHOBullying, and #ArtIsFreedom trended widely, reinforcing our collective determination to stand against oppressive rules. Town hall meetings and community forums saw record attendance as residents gathered to share their experiences and envision a future where creativity was not only tolerated but celebrated. Neighbors who had long been silenced by the threat of fines now spoke proudly about their right to express themselves through art, landscaping, and innovative use of their property. "Our homes and our land are our sanctuaries," one passionate resident declared at a crowded meeting, his words echoing with newfound confidence. The atmosphere was charged with hope and renewal, a promise that Cedar Grove would always honor the creative spirit of its residents. Within the reformed HOA board and local regulatory agencies, swift changes were implemented. Senior officials, led by Director James Carter and Lieutenant Marcus Reed, launched comprehensive training programs on ethical conduct, cultural sensitivity, and the responsible management of community resources. Regular internal audits and transparent disciplinary processes were established to ensure that every complaint would be carefully scrutinized and that no resident would ever again be subjected to arbitrary fines or invasive enforcement. Our duty is to protect the rights and dignity of every member of our community, Lieutenant Reed affirmed during a follow-up press conference, reinforcing our commitment to fairness and justice. Community leaders and local civil rights organizations mobilized as well, organizing workshops, public forums, and educational campaigns designed to empower residents and promote a culture of creative freedom. When we stand together, our voices are powerful enough to dismantle even the most outdated systems, a local activist proclaimed at a town hall meeting, inspiring neighbors to unite and advocate for a more inclusive, flexible governance model. For me, the journey from confrontation to resolution was both deeply personal and profoundly transformative. My decision to reclaim my driveway and to transform the very shortcut imposed by HOA Karen into a stunning hedge maze had not only restored my property rights, but had ignited a movement that resonated throughout Cedar Grove. Neighbors, once fearful of arbitrary fines and rigid enforcement, found their voices and shared their own stories of defiance. The digital evidence that showcased my hedge maze became a rallying cry for every resident who believed in the sanctity of private property and the right to live freely, creatively, and authentically. Karen Miller, once the formidable enforcer of the HOA's draconian policies, was now reduced to a cautionary tale, a vivid reminder that no one is above accountability when a community unites for justice. Her influence waned as digital records of her past transgressions circulated widely, underscoring the urgent need for reform and the dangers of unchecked authority. At a final celebratory event held in the Central Park of Cedar Grove, residents, local officials, and community advocates gathered under the soft glow of the setting sun. A large banner reading, "Unity, Freedom, and Property Rights," was unfurled between towering oaks, and heartfelt speeches filled the air with promises of a brighter, more inclusive future. Today, we celebrate our victory over arbitrary interference, a victory for every homeowner and every creative spirit in our community, Councilwoman Jenkins proclaimed, her voice ringing with unwavering determination. The resounding standing ovation that followed was a powerful affirmation of our collective commitment to protect our freedoms and ensure that no one can abuse public power without consequence. As each new day dawned over Cedar Grove, the legacy of that fateful confrontation endured as a beacon of transformative change. The story of how HOA Karen turned my driveway into a shortcut and how I responded by transforming it into a sprawling hedge maze that reclaimed my property became a rallying cry for every resident who believed in individual rights and creative freedom. Every sunrise now carried the promise that in Cedar Grove, truth, justice, and the right to innovate would forever prevail. In the end, what began as a personal battle evolved into a watershed moment for our entire community. We emerged more united, more vigilant, and more determined to safeguard our rights against any form of bureaucratic overreach. And as the sun rose each morning over our reclaimed neighborhood, it carried with it the promise that Cedar Grove would forever be a place where creativity, integrity, and respect for individual property were cherished above all else.